I never believed in miracles until I met Luna. The rain was hammering against the windows of Sunshine Animal Shelter that cold October morning when I first rolled my wheelchair through those heavy glass doors. My legs hadn't worked properly since birth, and at 12 years old, I'd grown used to people's stares, their awkward smiles, the way they'd speak to my mom instead of directly to me. But what I wasn't prepared for was the broken whimper that would change everything about how I saw the world. In the back corner of the shelter, curled up in the smallest kennel they had, was the most beautiful German shepherd I'd ever seen. But she wasn't moving. Her golden and black coat was matted with dried blood, and one of her back legs was twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. Her brown eyes were open, but they stared at nothing, completely empty of hope. The kennel smelled of antiseptic and sadness, and the air was thick with the weight of suffering that seemed to radiate from every corner of that small space. I'd love to know, what time is it where you are right now, and which city or state are you watching from? My name is Emma, and this is the story of how a disabled girl and a broken dog found healing in each other when the rest of the world had given up on both of us. It's a story about second chances, about the kind of love that doesn't count the cost, and about discovering that sometimes the most beautiful souls come in the most unexpected packages. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I'd always felt different, not just because of my disability, but because of how deeply I felt everything around me. While other kids my age were playing video games or worrying about their hair, I was the one who cried when I saw roadkill on the highway. I was the one who saved earthworms from sidewalks after rainstorms, carefully moving them to safety with gentle hands. My mom used to say I had an old soul, but I think what she really meant was that my heart was too big for my tiny body. The doctors had a fancy name for my condition, spina bifida. What it meant in simple terms was that my spine hadn't formed correctly before I was born, leaving me with limited feeling and movement in my legs. I'd been in and out of hospitals my entire life, enduring surgeries, physical therapy, and treatments that left me exhausted and discouraged. By the time I turned 12, I'd already had more operations than most adults face in their entire lifetime. My childhood was a blur of sterile hospital rooms, the smell of disinfectant, and the sound of machines beeping through long, sleepless nights. I knew the names of every nurse on the pediatric ward at Columbus Children's Hospital. I could navigate the hallways in my sleep, knew which vending machines had the best snacks, and had memorized the rotation schedule of the cleaning staff. But that October morning was different. It was the first time in months that I'd felt strong enough to leave the house for something other than a medical appointment. My mom had been volunteering at Sunshine Animal Shelter for years, and she'd been begging me to come with her. I'd always refused, afraid of the sadness I might find there, afraid that seeing abandoned animals would break my heart even more than it already was. The previous week had been particularly difficult. I'd undergone another surgery to correct a problem with a shunt that drained fluid from my brain, a common complication of spina bifida. The recovery had been brutal, leaving me weak and nauseous for days. I'd spent hours staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, feeling sorry for myself and wondering if this was all my life would ever be. Finally, I agreed to go to the shelter. The building sat on the outskirts of town, a modest brick structure surrounded by chain-link fencing and carefully maintained gardens. As we pulled into the parking lot, I could hear the sound of dogs barking and volunteers calling out instructions to each other. Despite my reservations, I felt a flutter of curiosity in my chest. The shelter was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of the sterile, clinical environment I'd expected, it was warm and filled with the sounds of life. Dogs barking, cats meowing, volunteers laughing as they played with puppies in the exercise yard. The walls were painted in cheerful yellows and blues, and motivational posters hung everywhere with sayings like, "Every animal deserves a second chance, and love has no boundaries." The main lobby smelled like pine-scented cleaner mixed with the warm, comforting scent of animals. Children's artwork covered one entire wall. Drawings of happy dogs and cats with rainbow-colored fur and oversized smiles. A donation jar sat on the front desk, already half full of crumpled bills and loose change. But none of that mattered the moment I saw her. Luna was lying in kennel number 7, and according to the chart hanging on her door, she'd been there for almost 3 months. The volunteer who was showing us around, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, stopped talking when she noticed where my attention had gone. Mrs. Patterson had been working at the shelter for over 15 years, and the lines around her eyes spoke of countless animals she'd loved and lost. "She's been through hell," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, her voice heavy with sadness. "Someone found her on the side of Highway 32, probably hit by a car. The vet said she must have been crawling for days, trying to find help. By the time she got here, infection had set in, and her back leg was so badly damaged they had to operate twice just to save it." I wheeled myself closer to the kennel, my hands gripping the armrests of my wheelchair so tightly my knuckles turned white. Luna's breathing was shallow, and every few seconds, a small whimper would escape her throat. It was the sound of pure suffering, and it cut through me like a knife. Her water bowl was full but untouched, and the blanket someone had lovingly placed in her kennel remained pushed into the corner, unused. The kennel itself was larger than the others, designed to accommodate dogs with special needs. But somehow it still seemed too small for Luna's suffering. She took up only a fraction of the space, curled into herself as if trying to disappear entirely. "Has anyone tried to adopt her?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Mrs. Patterson shook her head, and I could see tears gathering in her weathered eyes. "People come in looking for healthy, happy dogs. They want a pet that can run and play fetch, not one that needs constant medical care and may never fully recover. We've had a few families show interest, but when they hear about the medical expenses and the long-term care she'll need..." Mrs. Patterson's voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood exactly what she meant, because I'd heard similar conversations about myself my entire life. Doctors whispering to my parents about my prognosis, teachers discussing my limitations, other kids at school talking about how I'd never be able to do the things they took for granted. The reality was harsh but familiar. Luna was damaged goods in the eyes of most people, just like I was. She required too much effort, too much patience, too much love without guarantee of a return on investment. But looking at Luna, I didn't see a broken dog. I saw a fighter. I saw someone who had survived the unthinkable and was still breathing, still trying, still hoping for something better. I saw myself reflected in her pain, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to feel truly connected to another living being. "Can I go inside?" I asked. Mrs. Patterson looked uncertain, glancing between me and Luna with obvious concern. "Honey, she's been through so much trauma. We're not sure how she'll react to strangers. She might be scared or even aggressive. Some of the volunteers can't even get close to her anymore." "I'm not exactly a stranger to trauma," I replied, and something in my voice must have convinced her, because she unlocked the kennel door. The moment I rolled my wheelchair into that small space, everything changed. The air seemed to shift, becoming charged with an energy I'd never experienced before. Luna lifted her head for the first time since I'd been watching her, and our eyes met. I'd heard people talk about love at first sight, but I'd never experienced it until that moment. It wasn't romantic love, of course, but something deeper and more profound. It was the recognition of one wounded soul seeing another. Her eyes were the most beautiful shade of brown I'd ever seen. Dark chocolate with flecks of gold that caught the fluorescent light. But more than their color, it was what I saw in them that took my breath away. Pain, yes, but also intelligence, resignation, But underneath it all, a tiny flicker of hope that hadn't quite been extinguished. "Hey, beautiful girl," I whispered, extending my hand slowly. "I'm Emma. I've been hurt too." Luna's nose twitched, and she made a soft sound that was somewhere between a whimper and a sigh. Very carefully, she lifted her head and sniffed my fingers. Her touch was so gentle it made my heart ache. Her nose was warm and slightly damp, and I could feel her breath against my palm. "I know what it's like to be different," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know what it's like when people look at you and only see what's wrong instead of what's right. But I see you, Luna. I see how strong you are." Something miraculous happened then. Luna, who hadn't moved from her position in 3 months according to Mrs. Patterson, slowly began to shift her body. It was clearly painful. I could see her muscles trembling with the effort, could hear the small sounds of discomfort she made with each movement. But she was determined. Inch by inch, she moved closer to me until her head was resting against my leg. I couldn't feel the physical sensation of her touch because of my spina bifida. But emotionally, it was the most powerful moment of my life. Here was this broken, abandoned dog, and she was choosing to trust me. She was choosing to hope again. The kennel fell silent except for the sound of our breathing. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of shelter life continuing. Volunteers walking dogs, cats meowing for attention, the occasional bark or playful yelp. But inside kennel number 7, time seemed suspended. I spent the next hour in that kennel, just sitting with Luna and talking to her. I told her about my surgeries, about the nights I'd spent crying because I couldn't run and play like other kids. I told her about the bullies at school who called me names like Wheels and Broken Doll, and the way some adults would speak to me like I was mentally disabled just because I was in a wheelchair. I told her about the time in 3rd grade when my class went on a field trip to a playground, and I had to sit on the bench and watch while everyone else went down the slide and played on the monkey bars. I told her about the birthday party I wasn't invited to because the house had stairs and the parents thought it would be too complicated to include me. But I also told her about the good things, about my mom, who never treated me like I was fragile and who had taught me to believe in my own strength, about my art teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who always said I had the most beautiful way of seeing the world, and who displayed my paintings prominently in the school hallway. About the stories I wrote in my journal, filled with characters who were different but powerful in their own unique ways. I told Luna about my dream of becoming a veterinarian someday, of helping animals who couldn't help themselves. I told her about the books I read voraciously, especially the ones about people who overcame impossible odds to achieve their dreams. Luna listened to every word, and I swear I could see understanding in her eyes. When I talked about pain, her ears would flatten slightly against her head. When I talked about hope, her tail would give the tiniest wag. It was as if she was absorbing not just my words, but the emotions behind them. As I spoke, I noticed details about Luna that I'd missed before. Her coat, despite being matted and dull, was incredibly thick and beautiful. Her paws were large and strong, built for running and playing. Her ears were perfectly shaped, alert and expressive even in her weakened state. But it was her scars that told the real story. In addition to the obvious injury to her back leg, I could see smaller scars along her shoulders and neck. These weren't from the car accident, I realized. These were older, the kind of marks that came from a life that hadn't been kind long before that terrible day on Highway 32. When I finally had to leave, she actually lifted her head and watched me go. Her eyes followed my wheelchair as I maneuvered through the kennel door, and I could swear I saw disappointment in her expression. Mrs. Patterson was amazed. "I've never seen her respond to anyone like that," she said as we walked back to the main area. "You have a gift, Emma. In all my years here, I've never seen such an immediate connection between a child and an animal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Luna lying alone in that kennel, probably wondering if I was just another person who would walk away and never come back. I'd experienced that feeling so many times myself. The crushing disappointment when people who seemed to care suddenly disappeared from my life because my disability made them uncomfortable. I thought about all the visitors who had probably looked at Luna over the past 3 months. How many of them had walked away the moment they learned about her injuries? How many had seen her as nothing more than a burden, a financial liability, a problem too complicated to solve? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not at the people who had passed Luna by. I understood their reasoning, even if I didn't agree with it. I was angry at a world that constantly devalued beings based on their perceived imperfections. I was angry at a society that treated both disabled children and disabled animals as disposable. But mostly, I was angry at myself for all the times I'd accepted that treatment as normal. I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity of purpose I'd never experienced before. I found my mom in the kitchen, making coffee and reading the newspaper. The morning light was streaming through the windows, and I could hear birds singing in the trees outside. "Mom," I said, "I want to adopt Luna." My mom looked up from her paper, and I could see the concern in her eyes. "Emma, honey, Luna needs special care that we might not be able to provide. She needs expensive medical treatments, and she may never be able to walk normally again. The responsibility would be enormous." "So do I replied. "And you've never given up on me." My mom was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She set down her coffee cup and really looked at me, studying my face with the intensity that only mothers possess. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said finally. I told her about the connection I'd felt with Luna, about how she'd responded to me in a way that surprised even the shelter volunteers. I told her about the recognition I'd seen in Luna's eyes, the understanding that had passed between us without words. But more than that, I told her about the purpose I'd felt sitting in that kennel. For the first time in my life, I'd felt truly needed by another living being. Not pitied, not tolerated, but genuinely needed. "I think we could help each other," I said. "I think Luna and I understand each other in a way that most people couldn't understand either of us." My mom was quiet for another long moment, and then she smiled. It was the kind of smile that reached her eyes, the kind that told me she was seeing something in me that maybe she'd never seen before. "You're right," she said. "Let's go see what we can do." When we arrived at the shelter later that morning, Mrs. Patterson was surprised to see us again so soon. But when I explained what I wanted to do, her eyes filled with tears. "Emma," she said, "Luna's medical bills are going to be enormous. She needs surgery on her leg, physical therapy, medications. It could cost thousands of dollars, and there's no guarantee that she'll ever be completely healthy." "How much?" my mom asked, and I could hear the determination in her voice. Mrs. Patterson looked through Luna's file, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned the pages. "The estimate from the veterinary specialist is around $8,000 just for the surgery. And that's not including the follow-up care and therapy she'll need. We're talking about potentially $15,000 to $20,000 over the next year." My heart sank. $8,000 might as well have been $8 million. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. Most of our money went to my own medical expenses, the surgeries, the physical therapy, the specialized equipment I needed. My mom worked 2 part-time jobs just to keep up with our bills. I could see the disappointment starting to cloud my mom's face, and I felt my dream of helping Luna beginning to slip away. But then something unexpected happened. Word had already begun to spread through the shelter about my visit with Luna the day before. Volunteers started gathering around us, and Mrs. Patterson began making phone calls. Within an hour, she had contacted the local newspaper, and by that afternoon, a reporter was at the shelter interviewing me about my bond with Luna. The reporter was a young woman named Jessica Martinez, and she had a gentle way of asking questions that made me feel comfortable opening up about my experiences. She spent time taking photos of Luna and me together, capturing the moment when Luna would lift her head whenever I spoke to her. But Jessica didn't just focus on the heartwarming aspects of our connection. She also asked the hard questions about the financial reality we were facing, about the challenges that both Luna and I would encounter on the road to recovery. The story that ran the next day was titled, "Disabled Girl Fights to Save Disabled Dog." It told the story of how Luna and I had found each other, and how we both needed expensive medical care that our families couldn't afford. The reporter had done her research, talking to Mrs. Patterson about Luna's condition, and to my mom about my own medical history. But the most powerful part of the article was the quote they used for me. "Luna and I are both broken in ways that most people can see, but we're not broken in the ways that matter most. We still have love to give, and we still have the capacity for joy." Sometimes the most beautiful relationships are between people who understand what it means to fight for every day. I had no idea that those words would change everything. Within 24 hours, the shelter's phone was ringing off the hook. People were calling from all over the state, asking how they could help. Someone set up a GoFundMe page, and donations began pouring in. A local veterinary clinic offered to perform Luna's surgery at cost. A physical therapy clinic that specialized in animal rehabilitation volunteered their services for free. The response was overwhelming and humbling. Strangers were sending letters with their donations, sharing their own stories of beloved pets who had needed special care. Children were organizing lemonade stands and donating their allowances. Elderly people were sending in checks with notes about dogs they'd loved and lost. But the most incredible call came from a woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, who ran a clinic that specialized in both human and animal physical therapy. She'd read the article and was fascinated by the idea of Luna and me recovering together. "I've never tried parallel therapy with a child and a dog before," she explained to my mom over the phone. "But I think Emma and Luna could help each other heal in ways that traditional therapy can't achieve. If you're willing to try something unconventional, I'd like to work with both of them free of charge." Dr. Chun had been practicing for over 20 years, and she'd seen remarkable results when humans and animals work together in therapeutic settings. She believed that the emotional bond between Luna and me could be harnessed to motivate both of us to push through the difficult aspects of recovery. 2 weeks later, Luna's surgery was scheduled. The night before, I spent hours at the shelter, sitting with her and trying to prepare her for what was coming. I explained about the surgery, about how the doctors were going to fix her leg so that she could walk without pain. "I promise you," I told her, "I'll be here when you wake up. I'm not going anywhere." The morning of the surgery, I was there when they wheeled her into the operating room. She looked so small and vulnerable on that metal table, and I had to fight back tears as I watched the doors close behind her. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Dr. Williamson, the orthopedic specialist who had volunteered his services, was meticulous in his work. He had to insert several pins and a metal plate to stabilize Luna's shattered bone, and he took extra time to ensure that her leg would heal properly. I waited in the recovery area, my stomach churning with anxiety. My mom sat beside me, holding my hand and offering quiet reassurance. Mrs. Patterson came and went, bringing updates from the surgical team and cups of hot chocolate from the vending machine. When Dr. Williamson finally emerged from the operating room, his face was tired but smiling. "The surgery was successful," he announced. "It's going to be a long recovery, but there's no reason Luna shouldn't regain most of the function in her leg." I was there when she woke up from the anesthesia. She was groggy and confused, her eyes unfocused and her movements unsteady. But when she saw me sitting beside her recovery kennel, she made that same soft sound she'd made the first day we met. "Hey, beautiful girl," I whispered, reaching through the kennel bars to stroke her head. "We're going to get through this together." The adoption paperwork was finalized the next day. After 3 months in the shelter, Luna was finally going home. But she'd need round-the-clock care for the first few weeks. My mom had taken time off work, and I'd arranged with my school to do independent study, so I could be there for Luna's recovery. Bringing Luna home was both exciting and terrifying. She was still heavily medicated and could barely lift her head. We'd set up a comfortable area for her in the living room, with soft blankets and easy access to food and water. But I could see the fear in her eyes. She'd been abandoned once before, and she was probably wondering if this was too good to be true. Our house had been modified over the years to accommodate my wheelchair, with ramps instead of stairs and wider doorways. As it turned out, these modifications also made it easier for Luna to navigate while she was recovering. That first night, I slept on the couch next to Luna's bed. Every time she whimpered, I was there to comfort her. Every time she needed to be moved or given medication, I helped my mom. Despite my own physical limitations, I was determined to be the caregiver Luna needed. The first few days were challenging. Luna was disoriented from the pain medication, and she had little appetite. We had to hand-feed her small amounts of food and encourage her to drink water. She was completely dependent on us for everything, and I began to understand the enormous responsibility we'd taken on. But I also began to understand something else. For the first time in my life, I was the one providing care instead of receiving it. I was the one making medical decisions, administering medications, and monitoring recovery progress. It was empowering in a way I'd never experienced before. Dr. Chun came to the house for our first therapy session a week after Luna's surgery. She was a small woman with kind eyes and an incredibly gentle manner with both humans and animals. She spent the first hour just observing Luna and me, watching how we interacted, noting the ways we moved and responded to each other. "This is remarkable," she said finally. "Emma, you've been unconsciously adjusting your movements to accommodate Luna's injuries. And Luna, you've been positioning yourself to be as close to Emma as possible without interfering with her wheelchair. You're already working as a team." Dr. Chen's therapy approach was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of focusing on what Luna and I couldn't do, she focused on what we could do together. She designed exercises that we could perform side by side, movements that would help both of us build strength and coordination. Traditional physical therapy had always felt like a series of failures to me. Therapists would push me to achieve goals that seemed impossible, and I'd leave each session feeling defeated and discouraged. But working with Luna was different. We were both starting from a place of injury and limitation, and we were both working toward the same goal of improved mobility. For example, she had me practice transferring from my wheelchair to a mat on the floor, while Luna practiced standing and taking small steps. We'd both be working on balance and core strength, but we'd be doing it together, encouraging each other through the difficult moments. The progress was slow at first. Luna was still in significant pain, and I was struggling with my own physical limitations. But Dr. Chun was patient and creative, constantly adapting her approach based on what we needed. One of the most powerful exercises involved something she called mirror therapy. I would sit on the floor with Luna beside me, and we would practice moving our legs together. I would use my arms to help move my legs through a range of motion, while Luna would practice weight-bearing exercises with her injured leg. "You're both learning to adapt to your physical limitations," Dr. Chun explained. "But more importantly, you're learning that those limitations don't define your worth or your potential for happiness." The exercises were challenging, but they were also oddly comforting. Luna and I would grunt and strain together, both of us working through pain and frustration. But there was solidarity in our shared struggle, a sense that we understood each other's efforts in a way that no one else could. As the weeks passed, something beautiful began to happen. Luna started to trust that she was truly safe and loved. She began to show interest in food again, and her tail, which had been perpetually tucked between her legs, started to wag occasionally. The first time I saw Luna's tail wag, I actually started crying. It was such a small thing, but it represented hope. It meant that somewhere inside her injured body and traumatized mind, joy was beginning to return. I was changing too. For the first time in my life, I felt truly needed and useful. Taking care of Luna gave me a purpose that went beyond my own struggles. I was responsible for another living being, and that responsibility made me feel stronger and more capable than I'd ever felt. Our breakthrough moment came about 6 weeks after Luna's surgery. Dr. Chun had been working with Luna on walking with her injured leg, using a harness and support system to help her bear weight gradually. Luna had been resistant to the exercises, clearly afraid of the pain that movement might bring. I was sitting on my therapy mat, doing my own leg exercises, when I noticed Luna watching me intently. She was lying on her side, her injured leg extended, and she was mimicking the movements I was making with my legs. The sight took my breath away. Here was this wounded animal, trying to copy my exercises because she understood that we were in this together. Without thinking, I started talking to her. "Come on, Luna," I said. "We can do this together, just like we always do." Luna looked at me for a long moment, and then something incredible happened. She rolled over and pushed herself up onto her 3 good legs. Using the wall for support, she took one small, careful step forward. Then another, and another. Dr. Chun was so excited she started crying. "In all my years of practice," she said, "I've never seen anything like this." Luna wasn't motivated by treats or praise. She was motivated by her desire to move with you, Emma. That was the turning point for both of us. Over the next few months, Luna gradually regained mobility in her injured leg. She would never run like a normal dog, but she could walk, and she could play gentle games, and most importantly, she could live without constant pain. My own progress was just as remarkable. Working with Luna had strengthened my core muscles and improved my balance. But more than that, it had given me a confidence I'd never possessed before. I was no longer just a disabled kid who needed to be taken care of. I was Luna's partner in recovery, her protector, her family. The story of Luna and me had continued to spread throughout our community and beyond. We were featured in more newspaper articles, and a local TV station did a segment about our therapy sessions with Dr. Chun. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. One day, Mrs. Patterson called to tell us that the National Animal Welfare Association wanted to present Luna and me with an award for inspiring others to look beyond disabilities when choosing pets to adopt. The ceremony would be held at the state capitol, and we'd be meeting with other children and animals who had formed similar bonds. The week leading up to the ceremony was filled with nervous excitement. I'd never spoken in front of a large group before, and the thought of being on stage terrified me. But Luna seemed to sense my anxiety, and she would rest her head on my lap whenever my breathing became shallow or my hands started to shake. Standing on the steps of the Capitol building, with Luna sitting proudly beside my wheelchair, I felt a sense of accomplishment I'd never experienced before. The governor was there, along with reporters and photographers, but all I could focus on was Luna's steady breathing and the warmth of her presence beside me. The ceremony was beautiful, with several other children and their special needs pets being honored for their relationships and advocacy work. There was a boy named Marcus who had adopted a blind cat, and a girl named Sophie who had rescued a 3-legged rabbit. Each story was unique, but they all shared the same theme of love transcending physical limitations. When it was my turn to speak, I'd prepared a speech about the importance of giving special needs animals a chance. But when I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces looking back at me with interest and expectation, I forgot everything I'd planned to say. Instead, I found myself telling the truth about what Luna had taught me. Before I met Luna, I thought being different meant being less than. I thought that because my body didn't work the way other people's bodies worked, I had less to offer the world. But Luna showed me that being different doesn't mean being broken. It means being unique. It means having experiences and perspectives that others don't have. When Luna and I do our therapy exercises together, we're not trying to become normal. We're learning to be the best versions of ourselves. We're learning that love doesn't require perfection, and that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are between people who understand what it means to struggle. I paused, looking down at Luna, who was gazing up at me with those same trusting brown eyes that had first captured my heart. If you take anything away from our story, I said, let it be this. Don't walk past the broken ones. Don't dismiss someone because they need extra care, or because they can't do everything that others can do. Sometimes the most rewarding relationships are with those who need us most. And sometimes, when we open our hearts to help someone else heal, we discover that we're the ones who end up being healed. The applause that followed was overwhelming. But what meant the most to me was the feeling of Luna's head pressing against my leg. Even though I couldn't feel it physically, I could feel it in my heart. After the ceremony, people approached us with their own stories. An elderly man told me about his dog who had lost an eye, but had lived a full and happy life. A young mother shared how her daughter had learned empathy by caring for a paralyzed hamster. Each conversation reinforced what Luna and I had discovered. That disability doesn't diminish the capacity for love and joy. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself thinking about that first day at the shelter. I thought about how Luna had looked so hopeless, so resigned to her fate. I thought about how I'd felt walking into that place, afraid of what I might find, afraid of having my heart broken again. But instead of heartbreak, I'd found healing. Instead of sadness, I'd found purpose. Instead of feeling sorry for myself, I'd learned to celebrate what made me different. Luna was lying on her bed beside mine, and I could hear her soft breathing in the darkness. Her breathing was deeper now, more relaxed than it had been in those first weeks after her surgery. Sometimes she would make small sounds at her sleep, and I liked to imagine she was dreaming about running through fields or playing with other dogs. Tomorrow we had another therapy session with Dr. Chun, and next week we were starting a new program where we'd visit children in the hospital who were going through their own medical challenges. The idea had come from Dr. Chun, who thought that seeing Luna and me together might give other kids hope. But I knew the truth. We'd probably get more out of those visits than the children we were trying to help. Because there's something magical that happens when you realize you're not alone in your struggles. Our first hospital visit was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. We met children who were facing challenges that made my spina bifida seem minor by comparison. There was a little girl named Aisha who was battling leukemia, and a boy named Tyler who had been born with a rare genetic condition that affected his ability to walk and speak. But what struck me most was how these children responded to Luna. They didn't see her limp or focus on her scars. They saw a beautiful dog who had overcome something difficult and was now living a happy life. Luna, in turn, seemed to understand the pain these children were experiencing, and she would rest her head gently on their beds or allow them to stroke her soft fur. One little boy, probably about 6 years old, asked me if Luna had been sad when she was hurt. I told him that yes, she had been very sad, but that she had learned to be happy again. "Do you think I'll be happy again too?" he asked, and the question nearly broke my heart. "I know you will," I told him, "because you're strong, just like Luna. And because there are people who love you and want to help you feel better. That conversation stayed with me for days. It reminded me of why Luna and I were doing this work, why our story mattered. We weren't just inspiring people to adopt special needs pets. We were showing children that they could overcome their challenges and find joy again. As fall turned to winter, Luna and I settled into a routine that felt natural and comfortable. Our morning therapy sessions with Dr. Chun had become something we both looked forward to. Luna's mobility continued to improve, and my own strength and confidence grew alongside hers. The media attention had begun to die down, which was a relief in some ways. While I was grateful for the platform it had given us to advocate for special needs animals, I was also happy to return to a more normal life. But normal for us was something entirely new. Luna had become my constant companion, accompanying me to school on special occasions and sleeping beside my bed every night. She had learned to navigate stairs by taking them slowly and carefully, and she could even manage short walks around the neighborhood. More importantly, Luna had learned to trust again. The fearful, broken dog I'd met in that shelter kennel had been replaced by a confident, loving companion who greeted each day with enthusiasm. She had favorite toys now, and she would play gentle games of tug-of-war with a rope that Dr. Chun had given her. 6 months after Luna's surgery, we went back to visit the shelter. Mrs. Patterson was overjoyed to see how well Luna was doing. She walked with a slight limp, but she was walking confidently, and her coat was shiny and healthy. But the best part of the visit was watching Luna's reaction to the other dogs. Instead of being fearful or aggressive, she was gentle and calm. She seemed to understand that the animals in the shelter were going through their own difficult journeys, and she approached them with the same compassion that had been shown to her. "We've had 12 more dogs adopted since your story was published," Mrs. Patterson told us. "People have been specifically asking for the dogs with special needs, the ones who usually get overlooked. You and Luna started something beautiful here." The numbers were encouraging, but what really mattered to me were the individual stories. Mrs. Patterson told us about Max, a senior dog with arthritis who had found a home with a retired couple. She told us about Bella, a cat with one eye who had been adopted by a family with young children who didn't care about her appearance. Each adoption represented a life saved, a second chance given, a family made complete. And each one could be traced back to the moment when Luna and I had found each other in that small kennel. As we were leaving, I noticed a small girl, probably about 8 years old, standing in front of one of the kennels. She was using crutches, and she was staring at a 3-legged cat with the same intensity I'd felt when I first saw Luna. The cat was orange and white, and according to the information card, his name was Rusty. He'd lost his leg in an accident, and he'd been at the shelter for almost 2 months. I wheeled over to the girl and introduced myself. Her name was Sarah, and she was there with her grandmother. She'd been asking about adopting Rusty, but her grandmother was worried about the expense and the special care he'd need. I told Sarah about Luna and our journey together. I told her about the challenges we'd faced and the incredible rewards we'd found. I told her about the community of people who had rallied around us, and how sometimes the most broken things become the most beautiful when they're given a chance to heal. By the time we left the shelter that day, Sarah's grandmother had filled out the adoption paperwork for Rusty. As we walked to our car, I heard Sarah talking to her new cat in the same gentle, encouraging voice I'd used with Luna. "You're going to be okay," she was saying. "We're going to figure this out together." The cycle was continuing, and it filled my heart with hope. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. I wrote about how Luna had changed my life, but also about how our story had rippled outward, touching other lives in ways I'd never imagined. I wrote about the letters we'd received from families who had adopted special needs pets after reading about us. I wrote about the children who had reached out to tell us that seeing Luna and me had given them hope for their own challenges. But mostly, I wrote about the profound lesson Luna had taught me. That love isn't about perfection. It's about seeing the beauty in what others might consider broken, and choosing to nurture that beauty until it blooms. As I closed my journal, Luna lifted her head from her bed and looked at me. In her eyes, I saw the same trust and love that had first connected us in that shelter kennel. But now I also saw something else: contentment, peace, the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. And for the first time in my life, I felt that same sense of belonging. Not because my disability had been cured or because my challenges had disappeared, but because I'd learned to see myself through Luna's eyes. I'd learned to value my uniqueness instead of hiding from it. The next morning, Dr. Chun called with exciting news. A medical journal wanted to publish a paper about our therapy sessions, documenting how humans and animals could help each other heal in ways that traditional therapy couldn't achieve. More importantly, she said, I've been contacted by 3 other therapy centers that want to start similar programs. Emma, what you and Luna have done together is going to help so many other children and animals find each other. The thought that our experience could help others was both thrilling and humbling. I thought about all the children in hospitals and therapy centers who might benefit from having an animal companion who understood their struggles. I thought about all the disabled animals in shelters who might find homes with families who could see past their limitations. Later that day, as Luna and I were doing our daily exercises in the backyard, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought us together. All the pain, all the struggle, all the moments when giving up would have been easier than continuing to fight. But if I'd given up, I never would have met Luna. If Luna had given up, she never would have survived long enough for us to find each other. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most difficult circumstances. Luna was lying in the sunshine, her injured legs stretched out comfortably. She was watching me with those wise brown eyes, and I could swear she was smiling. Not the happy panting of a dog who's excited, but the peaceful expression of a creature who knows she's loved unconditionally. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and I could hear birds singing in the trees around us. Luna's breathing was slow and steady, and every so often she would sigh with what sounded like complete contentment. As I watched her, I realized that Luna had given me more than companionship and purpose. She'd given me a new way of seeing the world. Where I used to see obstacles, I now saw opportunities. Where I used to see limitations, I now saw possibilities. And where I used to see broken things that needed to be fixed, I now saw beautiful things that needed to be loved exactly as they were. A year had passed since that rainy October morning when I first rolled my wheelchair through the doors of Sunshine Animal Shelter. In that time, Luna and I had both healed in ways that went far beyond the physical. We'd learned to trust, to hope, and to love without reservation. Our story had inspired others, yes, but more importantly, it had taught us that every being has value, regardless of their limitations. It had shown us that the most meaningful connections often happen between souls who understand what it means to overcome adversity. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Luna had fallen asleep in the warm light, her breathing deep and peaceful. I sat beside her, no longer afraid of being different, no longer ashamed of my limitations. We were both exactly who we were meant to be, and we were home.